Hello everyone, welcome back to Let's Play Great Ace Attorney 2. Ryunosuke's Resolve. In our last episode, we started our last chapter, and Male Strongheart is our judge. We've determined that perhaps Tobias Gregson wasn't going to a gentleman's club, he was going to a steamship. And it's time for us to prove it. How? Your guess is as good as mine. Look at the ticket. Notice the date of arrival on port. The ship arrived at the port of Dover on the 1st of November. Ah! The day on which the sound like a gunshot was heard on Fresno Street. In other words, on the day in question here, 31st of October, when the victim was on a clandestine mission. That ship hadn't yet docked on British shores. That would certainly make an undercover investigation somewhat challenging. The fact that the steamship hadn't yet reached Britain substantiates the defense's assertion that the victim was investigating the SS Grouse on the day in question. Then show your evidence for that assertion. Very well. In that case, counsel for the defense, present your evidence to the court now. Evidence that substantiates your claim that the victim was investigating the SS Grouse on the 31st. Ooh. Hang on one moment. We'll see if this works. No. All we've done is get a score. Those three equally nonsensical statements wasted 15 seconds of the court's time. You will accordingly suffer 15 seconds worth of penalty, counsel. Ooh! Ow! Oh, come on! Gregson was on board that ship the day before his body was found, and we know the SS Grouse stopped. Where is the evidence? Okay, so I found it out. We have to open the trunk and take a look at the passport inside. Was he about to go on a trip abroad then? Perhaps the date of departure might tell us something. That was on the 31st of October, just one day before the incident. Really? Gregson went to France the day before his body was discovered. Alright. There it is. That's what we need to look for. What's this? A passport for travel issued to the victim. Dated 31st of October. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that just one day before the inspector's body was discovered, there's a distinct possibility he wasn't even in the country. Ugh. Order! Order! This document is for passage to France. It does appear to have been officially authorized the day before the SS Grouse arrived at Dover. It docked on the northern coast of France for a night. According to my father, who was on board at the port of Dunkirk, France. What could possibly have taken the victim there? I'm impressed, Ryunosuke Naruhodo. I certainly didn't expect you to get your hands on that passport. What? You mean you knew about this? The prosecution's strategy for this trial has been laid down by the Crown Prosecution Office. On the day before the incident, the victim was investigating contraband dealings at a London club. That's the outcome of Scotland Yard's investigations, and the line the prosecutor has been asked to follow. But personally, I don't agree. I think the prosecutor's office is trying to hide something. What? And now that you've expertly disproven their assertion, I intend to reveal what I believe that something to be. What are you playing at, Prosecutor Asogi? A courtroom is a forum for the truth, my lord. Which is why it's my duty to present all the facts, without exception. Let me guess. This was your intention from the outset, wasn't it? The reason Inspector Gregson secretly made his way to the steamship docked in France to the day in question was to carry out a mission for the Reaper. The Reaper? Order! Order! What on earth are you saying, counsel? The prosecution made an assertion in court yesterday. Inspector Gregson was investigating the identity of the Reaper. When he discovered the location of the man's secret hideout, he was killed. And as I'm sure everyone can imagine, by the Reaper's hand. But in reality, the truth is the opposite of that. What? Inspector Gregson wasn't investigating the Reaper at all. He was, in fact, acting for the Reaper. So, you're saying the mission he was undertaking was, obviously, an assassination mission. Barak Van Zieks never carried out any of the usual actual killings. Whenever the Reaper's victims lost their lives, he always had a cast-iron alibi. Which tells us that he must have had an accomplice. And you claim that was Inspector Gregson. What the hell do you think you're saying, eh? My boss would never have done nothing like that. And yet, when you consider all the facts, it all makes perfect sense. No, it can't be. This is going to be really hard for you, Gina. We also arrived at the same conclusion, didn't we? That Inspector Gregson was operating as the Reaper. Even so, there's no way that the person giving him his orders was Lord Van Zieks. No, the true Reaper is somebody else. Barak Van Zieks is not the Reaper. A predictable response from someone who's advocating for the man. And even if it's true that Gregson was operating as an agent of the Reaper, the suggestion that he went aboard the SS Grouse on an assassination mission doesn't follow at all. Oh? You have some solid reason for doubting the assertion, do you, counsel? Absolutely. It's very simple. On the day in question, nobody was killed aboard that steamship. Professor Mikitoba and Judge Jigoku were on that very ship. I don't know. If someone had been assassinated, I'm sure we would have heard about it. Well, unless Tobias Gregson bungled it. What's so funny? You're right, of course. No suspicious deaths were reported on board this ship. But I think perhaps you've missed the point. That's precisely why Inspector Gregson himself lost his life. What? Gregson did board the SS Grouse that night with the intention of dispatching his mark. But his mission ended in failure. Failure? Totally called it. Totally called it. It seems that the defense hasn't yet grasped a very important detail here. And what are you talking about? What detail? Inspector Gina Lestrade. Well, the victim's notebook that you read an excerpt from earlier. That doesn't contain the details of secret investigations at all. It describes 10 years of assassination plots to be carried out by the Reaper of the Bailey. You're lying! Even if all them bludgers were all taken out, had it coming. The boss weren't the Reaper. Poor Gina. There's no question that Tobias Gregson was heavily involved in the Reaper's activities. You may just be an apprentice, but if you spent any time at Scotland Yard, you must have heard rumors. I heard nothing. and I don't believe a word of it. Then testify again as a representative of Scotland Yard. Consider it. Your chance to defend your boss. I don't. I concur. The witness will give a new formal testimony. Yes. Miss Lestrade, you will tell the court everything you know about Inspector Gregson's secret notebook. Yeah, this notebook does have a load of stuff about what the Reaper got up to these past 10 years. Names of victims, dates and places and stuff. And the last entry here was 31st of October. It said grouse for the place on that date, and then the name of the mark. There was a note about him being a criminal what got away from the Reaper in court 10 years ago or somewhat. But honest, that boss didn't do none of it. He was just investigating the Reaper, that's all. Keep personal opinion out of your testimony, witness. We require only established fact here. This must be so hard for her. You can't deny it now, surely, Ryunosuke Naruhodo. What can I deny? The notebook contains the name of the final mark and the location where the assassination would take place. That's information that the victim could only have known if he was working with the Reaper. So, who is to be this final mark? Go ahead, Inspector Lestrade. Read the name for the court. The name that's written alongside the entry that mentions the grouse on 31st of October. How do you read this thing? Reading's still not her strong suit. That ain't that problem, right now, Odo. It's a funny name. It ain't English. It's odd to read. So it's someone from overseas? I have a bash at it. Seishiro. Is that it? Yeah, Seishiro Jigoku. Oh boy. What? It can't be. Seishiro Jigoku? But that's Judge Jigoku. Seishiro Jigoku. Certainly not an English name, you're right. That can't be right. I know Judge Jigoku. I saw him the day before yesterday. He's here in London. I know for a fact that that man hasn't been assassinated. As I said, the Reaper failed. Oh, Gregson missed his chance to kill his mark and return to British shores. But the Reaper wouldn't tolerate the mistake, so he killed the inspector. Personally. The Reaper, of course, being the accused. Barak Van Zieks. It's an undeniably logical argument. Yes. Kazuma, you planned for the trial to go this way all along, didn't you? Hold it! Oh boy. There we go. Pray forgive the discourtesy of filling my hallowed chalice while I stand accused of murder. Talk to the foot. Lord Van Zieks! The accused has no right to speak uninvited in court. You will return to the dock. I say nothing of whether or not I'm the Reaper. That's the task of this court to decide. But there is one thing I can say unequivocally. My hand hurts. That girl is no detective. Whoa! Nah, that's right, I ain't. I'm an inspector. Repeating rumors heard around the yard. Reading entries from a notebook of unconfirmed origin. That's not testimony. It's practically a script. No doubt the rest of this trial will go exactly as you clearly planned. Your hatred of me is understandable. In your mind, I'm sure I'm the Reaper, who sent your father to the gallows all those years ago. Oh, you're getting under his skin. But you're in danger of becoming a far more sinister Reaper yourself. By attempting to have me condemned with this feeble excuse for testimony. What did you say? Mr. Naruhodo, this is our chance. My lord, the defense requests that the defendant be allowed to speak. He may be privy to important information relating to the testimony just given by the witness. Very well. I'll make an exception and grant the request. The defendant may remain in the witness stand for the cross-examination. Then allow me to toast the court's impartiality. Don't raise your glass in my direction, sir. Counsel for the defense, begin a cross-examination immediately. Ow! At once, my lord. The Reaper's notebook. Yeah, this notebook does have a load of stuff of what the Reaper got up to these past 10 years. We gotta cross-examine all of it. In other words, it shows that Gregson was basically acting as the Reaper. Not you and all! This ain't the only explanation, is it? He could have been investigating the Reaper in secret, and that notebook said what he found out. If I may. When originally people began referring to me as the Reaper, I didn't object. I believe the power to intimidate London's criminal classes into compliance with the law to be beneficial. But you carried out your own investigations into the true identity of the Reaper, didn't you? Yes, and those investigations proved conclusively that Gregson was one arm of the Reaper. One arm? What are you on about? The Reaper's victims were all extremely shrewd criminals at the top of their game. There's simply no way one person could have taken them on alone. The Reaper is an organization. With you at its head, I had spies at the yard keeping me abreast of Gregson's movements, letting me know when he was elsewhere. So I'd been able to check the most recent entry in his book. I knew the location. You knew it said Grouse. Believing it to be a reference to the Gentleman's Club, I went there on the day in question to investigate. Alone. So that explains why several members of the club claim to have seen you there. But of course, the inspector was not there. Because at the time, he was making his way to the steamship docked on the north coast of France. As shown by the passport found in the victim's metal trunk. Very well then. Back to your testimony about the comments of this notebook. Fine. Is something wrong, Mr. Naruhodo? You seemed a little shocked by something a moment ago. Oh, no. It's alright. I'm overthinking this, aren't I? Names of victims, dates, places, and stuff. And the last entry here is 31st of October. Names of victims, dates, places, and stuff. What in particular? Well, beside the victims' names, this other name kept popping up. What other name was that? It's the one I told you yesterday. The same name, written over and over again. You mean... Assassination. Yeah, that's the one. She's a friend of yours or somebody, isn't she? No, she's not. Were you even listening yesterday? Assassin. The assassin. And there's the pun in the name. Hardy, hardy, hard. What? Like, a killer, you mean? Gregson was the tactician, the one who came up with the plan of attack. He investigated the marks thoroughly, finding out when they would be vulnerable, and who to use to get at them. But the person actually executing his plans was someone else, you're saying? If that's true, then the Reaper does indeed start to sound like an organized group of vigilantes. Then perhaps what it said on the passport document, permission for the applicant and one additional person to travel. Could that additional person have been clearly the assassin, who was meant to take Sashiro Jigoku's life? Gina, can you confirm that? Against the final entry that listed Grouse and Seshiro Jigoku. What name was written? Oh, that's the only entry that didn't have a name next to it as it happens. What? It just had like a question mark or something there, I think. In other words, Gregson himself didn't know the identity of the assassin in that case. But Gregson was the one making the plans, was he not? Oh, how infuriating. A nameless assassin? Or he wasn't the one making up the missions. He was following them through. It said Grouse for the place on that date, and then the name of the mark. And you're saying that the mark listed was Seshiro Jigoku. That's what it said. Funny name, if you ask me. And I thought your name was odd. So pleased to have lost my crown there. Mr. Jigoku is the presiding judge of Japan's Supreme Court of Judicature. I remember the man. He came to our country as a visiting student 16 years ago. Studying international law and diplomacy under your tutelage, Lord Strongheart. That bearded young fellow was a very able man, I must say. Well, that you liked him means that can't be anything good. So Lord Strongheart was Judge Jigoku's member. George Jigoku. If I'm not mistaken, he returned to Japan 10 years ago now. 10 years ago, after that fateful case. Precisely. In the aftermath of the Professor case, his repatriation was organized immediately. It's a mystery why such a man would be listed in the inspector's notebook. I didn't think it was possible. The mood in here has got even worse now. Maybe I'll just keep talking. There was a note about him being a criminal what got away from the Reaper in court 10 years ago or something. Excuse me? What do you mean a criminal? Judge Jigoku's no criminal. Well, don't ask me. I don't know nothing about it. Oh, you remember what Father told us? Judge Jigoku did once appear in court here in Britain. It was related to the Professor case, I'm sure. Yes, of course, you're right. Seshiro was trying to mitigate Genshin's guilt, so he took to the stand to testify. But he got a little carried away and actually managed to break the witness stand. He also said some contemptuous word about the British Empire, for which he was charged. It was a pitiful situation, yes. I'd forgotten all about it, but I prosecuted that trial too, as it happens. You did? It was considered to be an adjunct to the Professor proceedings, you see. But he was acquitted under being told to make repatriation for the damage caused to the stand. And there you have it. Have what? Surely the accused hasn't forgotten his own rule. That there's no saving anyone who faces the Reaper in court, guilty or innocent alike. What? No! Are you suggesting that the reason Judge Jigoku was targeted for assassination? The man was sent back to Japan immediately after that trial. The Reaper had no time to do his work. But then, 10 years later, the mark returns to Britain once more. Perhaps now you start to see just how vindictive the Reaper is. Come on, that's absurd. To take someone's life for that. Isn't the whole premise of the Reaper absurd, killing those who have been found innocent? Clearly the rules by which the man operates are beyond a sane person's comprehension. But well, I had just about enough of this. Gina, all this nonsense about the boss planning to kill people, it's cobblers. Come on, Odo. Yes? Why ain't you saying nothing? Why ain't you yelling out objection or something? What? You gotta find a flaw. You do usually. Someone's lying here. No question. You gotta work out who it is. Please. For the boss. Yeah, I wanna believe you. But the deck's not stacked in your favor. That outburst was an insult to the court and your own testimony. I might have known that a common pickpocket from the back slums could make a detective. Ooh, showing your classism there. When this trial is over, you will forfeit your warrant card, Miss Lestrade. Is that clear? I've had it with a lot of you. It's laws every bleeding place you look in this world. Well, I've had enough. Gina? So have I. After that little speech of Gina's, I've made up my mind. To do what, Mr. Naruhodo? There was one point in this cross-examination where something that was said just didn't sit right with me. One statement seemed odd. Do you mean I'm not gonna let Gina's plea for help fall on deaf ears? Alright, last statement. Amano, help, you gotta find a flaw somewhere. I want to thank you, Gina. You helped me find my resolve. There we go, there's the title drop. What do you mean? Amongst everything we've heard during this cross-examination, there's one thing that defies explanation. One inconsistency. What? An inconsistency? Really, Odo? I don't quite know what it means yet, but yes, there's an inconsistency in something that was said by Kazuma. By you, Kazuma. Me? Is this some attempt at filibustering, counsel? Prosecutor Sogi's given no testimony. What are you suggesting I said that was inconsistent? You let something slip that you shouldn't have. When I present the relevant piece of evidence, I imagine you'll realize what you've done. Very well, counsel. Go ahead. What evidence reveals this alleged inconsistency in something the prosecutor has said? We tried to investigate this earlier. Alright, time to look inside again. You see that? There's something stuck on the side of that trunk there. It's glinting. It's a fragment of metal of some sort. But it's wedged in so tightly I can't remove it. Well, don't cut yourself. You better leave it, I think. Alrighty. Now, if I'm correct here... I didn't want to do that again. Yeah. Blah, 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 blah. No, don't do that. This is a trunk that belonged to Inspector Gregson. A metal construction, is it? Certainly very heavy. What's this? A blood stain? And a relatively fresh one, too. What, you mean that ain't grease from all the boss's fish and chips? Fresh blood on the inspector's trunk? That suggests that the victim was traveling with that luggage when he was killed. That can't be. There was no mention of any trunk in Scotland Yard's report. Yes, there's a reason for that. Immediately after Inspector's body was discovered, one of the street peddlers made off with the trunk, hoping to sell it. I found it. Me, with me nose for trouble. Which means that nobody should have known anything about that trunk. Unless, of course, we're talking about somebody who was present when the victim was killed. And yet, during the cross-examination of the witness just now, you said this, Kazuma. Because at the time, he was making his way to the steamship docked on the northern coast of France, as shown by the passport found in the victim's metal trunk. There we go! So the question is, how did you know about the inspector's trunk? We know the man went on a trip to France. Where else would he have put his passport? But you knew it was a metal trunk. Answer me honestly, Kazuma. On 31st of October, where exactly were you? At the port of Dunkirk, on board the SS Grouse. Is that the answer you're looking for, Ryunosuke? Kazuma, what did you... You were the assassin. I had considered the possibility before, but if Kazuma was there on the ship, then it can only have been for one purpose. No, Mr. Naruhodo, surely you don't think... Come on, Ryunosuke, you know the rules. The only thing that really talks in the courtroom is hard evidence. As I understand it, Inspector Gregson always took that case with him when he traveled. So as it stands, you prove nothing. Kazuma, are you challenging me to prove it beyond all reasonable doubt? That you were there that day, at the same place as the inspector? You was there, with Gregson? There's a clue you've overlooked, a secret that the trunk can tell us. I can't be sure at this point, but I need to verify it. It's that fragment we found. The accusation being made is deeply disturbing. But nevertheless, we must test it. Yes. The defense will identify for the court where in the trunk this alleged clue is to be found. Where is the evidence that ties Prosecutor Asogi to Inspector Gregson? Open. Open that up. Third time's the charm. Yep, that's the glint. Yeah, blah, 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 blah.
Got it!
There's a small piece of metal lodged in the wall of the trunk there. Like the tip of a blade. Hey, a blade! Kazuma, slung around your waist as ever today, is the steamed blade Karma. Of course it is. Won't you draw it, here in this courtroom, for all to see? Exercise caution, my learned friend. That man is the son of London's most notorious killer. Bailiff, watch Prosecutor Asogi like a hawk. That won't be necessary. It's missing its tip. Oh no! The tip is broken. Ugh. If the fragment of metal from the trunk fits together with the end of the sword, the question of who was there with Inspector Gregson will be answered. Agreed, Kazuma Asogi. Expertly done, Ryunosuke. That's a point to you, and well deserved. Do you mean to tell the court, Prosecutor Asogi? Yes, on 31st of October, I accompanied Inspector Gregson to Dunkirk in order to carry out a mission. So the additional person authorized to travel was me. And the mission was the assassination of the Mark. What? What? You mean you're the killer whose name was omitted from this notebook? You were following the Reaper's orders to dispatch Judge Jigoku. And we will find out the rest next time.